it also happens to be the role that I coach the game a lot in its perspective, because I personally have a very strong opinion on like how important the role is, and if you are able to master the role and then also like control it in a certain sense, then your ability to blueprint the game and as a result have a little bit more control and like strategy gets enhanced manyfold. So it is a role that I am quite confident in teaching, and it is also a role that I very much adore and believe is to be one of the most beautiful things that League of Legends has mastered, that other like mobile games in comparison have not done a very good job. Um, so those are the reasons, and as a preface or preface, I divided up this class into two sections. I did the same thing for laning phase as well last time, if you were there for that one as well. And the reason why I did it is because when I started like outlining for this class, I realized that there was just so much information to the point that it would be much better instruction wise for me to like bring out all the fundamentals and all the information that would be important for me to like actually take a look at high level jungling gameplay. And so I'll just lay out all the information today, so it will be heavily like information focused. um if you guys want to, it is one of those very rare occasions in League of Legends where you it is actually of help and of like great benefit to you to memorize some of these informations. So note taking is actually kind of recommended, if you, of course, if you're interested in jungling. And then next week or a week from now is, or like anytime next time that I actually set this up, is going to be a situation where I'm just going to be looking at like 4 to 5 VODs, and then just retain and then just and not analyzing all those games based off of the things that I'm going to be teaching you today. Is it fine if I record for personal use? Sure, you can, but I have all of my classes pretty much recorded, and then I post it up in a League classroom below. So like I don't mind at all, but like you could just use mine. These are the things that I'm going to be covering today. So first, an introduction to like what the jungle is, like what it's about, expectation of your role, and then basic info and tips. Something that like, I wager like some of you guys haven't even known, and things that are going to be helpful for you in the long run, as when you are just like doing basic things such as clearing camps, knowing how to specifically deal with certain objectives, so on and so forth. Then we're gonna get to like the little bit of like the basics of jungling with gambits and openers, what you do in your first clear and how it affects the game. And then we're going to talk about deployment, which is what you do after your first clear when you base and you're about to be quote unquote deploy onto the map again. And then six, we're going to talk about a very key term called priority, which is so integral to jungling to the point that it has been a buzzword that has been said a lot across casting desks and also around like the mouths of the coaches. And I just want to give a little bit more insight on the way that I think of it and my personal opinions on like how to understand it in a very generic manner. So first is just the introduction to the jungle, what it is, and so in my opinion, the jungle is the most important role in the early stages of the game, and it takes how the majority of the game will be played. And your impact is very diverse, and you could think of yourself as switch army knife that pretty much can define or support a comp in any way. So as a result, it is a role that both supportive champions and carry roles could go in equally and then still do an okay job to a great job. And the beauty of the role is that there has to be a symbiotic relationship between you and the three lanes that you are responsible for. You are supposed to ensure their welfare. At the same time, they are also supposed to ensure your welfare as well. As such, strong fundamental knowledge is required for you to navigate the role with consistency. The consistency, the key word that is the key word when we're talking about this. The point of the jungle is that in reality, when we really get to the theoretics and when we go to like the deep depth of like this role, there's actually no real correct answer in when I am looking specifically at these solutions. We have to remember that League of Legends is a knowledge limited game. You never have all the information that are ready when you're in the observer side. As a result, you're playing with obscurity, you're playing with limited information, and it actually becomes a mathematical Venetian games. And when that happens, then all you have to do is derive information that you have of limited content and then try to make the most optimal situation. And oftentimes, the optimal solution can sometimes be the incorrect situation when you have the absolute information. And that is the beauty of the role. And as a result, in order to ensure that you have gotten yourself to a more correct or better situation for you at all times, and these informations that I'm going to be providing to you is essential for you to know at all times. So, with all that long spiel that I have just given you, that most likely will intimidate you and like pretty much us, rightfully so, because in my opinion, this is the most difficult role to master. What are the expectations of you being a jungler? Spoiler alert, is more than just clearing camps. These are the main things that I personally expect out of a jungler, especially the ones that I coach. Um, First is that you are a supportive role in a way where you're expected to assist your allies in their laning phase, ensure that they're doing as much as they can to ensure their success. And this sounds easy in isolation, but the entire point is that these are all supposed to be precariously imbalanced with the other expectations that you have. Second is that you're expected to be a champion. Haha, funny, right? But it is not, because you're simultaneously allowed to you're simultaneously supposed to make sure that you have the right gold and the experience, so that you have get your own itemization at the same time that you are supporting the other team. Imagine a support's role in reality. You never necessarily have to worry about your income as a support unless you are making great mistakes such as dying or losing EXP. But junglers have to do the complete opposite. You have to earn your farm. You have to fight these camps, and you have to do it at the right time. Otherwise, you're going to get less gold and less experience than the enemy, and as a result, you're going to fall behind. So it is one of those games. It is one of those roles that farming doesn't necessarily become a passive thing that you do. It is something that you have to actively think about and fit it into your schedule of assisting other lanes. Lastly, the more obvious one is that you're the one with the summer spell spite. Oftentimes, you're going to be the only champion in your team that with that summoner spell, unless you have a specific cheese strat or an innovative strat that you have in mind with your team. And as a result, with the nature of it dealing true damage to monsters in a large quantity, you are responsible to make sure that you're present at the objective fights when your team requires it to be contested. And of course, take it in occasions that you are put in a situation of a 50-50. And that all implies that you are supposed to get all these three roles in harmony, and in actuality, you're expected to do all these three things at once. And as a result, it is a game of balance. It is a game of just like juggling and making sure that you have all these needs acquired for you. So you're assisting enemy players, simultaneously becoming a strong champion yourself, so you could contest neutral objectives with your team and not be a liability and be an asset. So this is when you bring out your notepads. This is when you bring out your notebooks and all that stuff, because these are the things that you're going to be. You probably don't know that much about these camps, and quite frankly speaking, whenever you're playing like normal games or like flex games with your friends and you give these information, then they're probably going to be impressed, because this is some things that are not necessarily familiar or are not even like documented that actively in wikis and things like that, which is quite surprising, dependent on like how extensive these wikis can be. So these are the basic tips on the 6 jungle camps that I have. Some of them are really obvious, so I'll just get the obvious ones out of the way. The blue is the one that everybody knows. Killing this camp gives you a buff that gives you extensive mana regen and also 10 ability haste. In the past, it used to be 10 CDR, but CDR has been removed from the game ever since. As a result, blue has become slightly weaker than it normally used to be. It used to be the early game objective to contest. As a result, you wouldn't see a lot of blue invades as much, especially unless you're specifically actively trying to deny it from the enemy mid laner, which of course has its utility, but nonetheless, it is still weaker just because ability haste as a stat is less effective than majority of the other stats that you would normally see. So, another one that is like pretty well documented is the red buff. Killing this one gives you a buff that allows your auto attack to inflict a dot effect that also slows the target. One thing that people don't know is that there's actually a health regen part. Now, you may know about this part, but you may not know when it actually applies, because it actually is a specific cutoff point. Before level 9, red will not massively regenerate your HP, and before that, it will just give you the auto attack buff. But after that part is completed, and then you're actually in a situation where you need to regenerate your HP, then just take red buff, sit around for a bit, and you'll realize that your HP is regenerating at a very fast rate. Let's talk about the 4 neutral camps that are just going to be still on your side of the map. Let's start with Gromp. Gromp is the only camp in the game that deals magic damage for his auto attacks. Every other one deals physical damage. Another thing that is remarkable with this camp is that its attack speed slows down consistently throughout the first 5 autos, and its sixth and the rest of its auto attacks will be at its slowest. So it initially has a lot of like initial burst damage, but as you continue to take down the camp, you'll realize that the damage is increasingly slower. And as a result, like it is one of those camps that you can actually DPS relatively consistently. You don't really have a hard time killing it. Also, it gives you a massive heal and regenerates a lot of your mana when you get executed early. As a result, it happens to be like a small potion for champions that have a lot of focus fire in the jungle that can kill it with relative ease. Wolves is also one that is not necessarily well documented, but the key point is that it has a chance to critically strike, which which is exactly the way that it means. It will inflict more damage on a random chance, and by off chance, if you let it, then wolves will actually shred you into pieces. And the small wolves and the large wolves actually have the same exact probability of critically striking, but the caveat is that the little ones actually have zero resistances and lower HP, while every large camp in the game possesses 20 resistances, both armor and magic resists, and naturally higher HP. As a result, killing the little ones first actually is really a helpful tip for these camps, just because it reduces the crit chance of it proccing as a result of just having to worry about one monster critically striking you instead of three. Raptors also applies the small like monster rule as well, just because stats wise the small raptors deal only 5 less damage per auto attack than the large one, and there's 5 of them. So you really need to kill them as fast as possible because again the small ones don't have resistances and they have lower HP, so they're much easier to kill. So usually this camp is actually off grounds for a lot of champions that have only single target focus because of this trend. Because even if you take one small camp at a time, then all those 4, 3, 2, 1, even at that situation, they'll keep hitting you. So, but if you have AoE, like most junglers do these days, try to kill the smaller ones first. The large raptors actually doesn't have that much of a high HP anyway. So if you are an AoE champion and you simultaneously are hitting the large one as well, then chances are they'll actually be low enough to the point that you get executed within 1 or 2 autos by the time you're done with the small ones. I delayed Crux until the last because it defies the small minion rule that I just talked about. It is the only camp in the game where the large camp deals significant amount of more damage than the smaller ones. As a result, there's 2 things that are recommended whenever you kill this camp. One, obviously, is to kill the big one first. Focus fire is very effective in this time. Second is when you start the camp, always start the camp towards the side of the small Krug instead of the large Krug, because with the nature of this camp being melee, it means that the large Krug has to walk towards you and then attack you. As a result, you're going to save yourself from getting hit by 1 or 2 auto attacks, which could mean worlds in the early game, where every trade that you do and every initiation that you do and every HP that you lose could potentially ruin a gank or a scuttlecraft fight. So now we're going to get to the neutral objectives, the ones that are not necessarily on your side of the map but are on the river. So the easy ones, the ones that we see rather early on in the game, are the crabs. Scuttle Crab, look at that little fella. He looks innocent, he looks nice, and he exactly is. He'll never attack you, and that's one of the best part about the objective. But the thing is, it's rather durable. It has a shield that is worth 60% of its maximum health, and it takes actually a very long time for certain champions to take it down. The caveat is that if you apply any form of crowd control that is not a slow, then it will remove the shield immediately, and as a result, it will be easier for you to kill. With that in mind, it has the equivalence, EXP, and gold of a neutral camp, and as a result, getting these scuttle crabs one by one actually makes a huge difference. Not only because of the golden experience, but when you kill it, it leaves like a little circle in the middle of the river that detects anyone that crosses over, and at the same time gives you a small movement speed buff, which doesn't necessarily give you like the game changer sometimes, but when you're running away from an ally or when you're trying to initiate into an enemy, that little movement speed sometimes actually pays off big time. Another thing about the crabs, the bigger one, is the Rift Herald, and there's a lack of clarity on specifically what this camp does, and how to kill it faster, because the general trend, like the thing that people know is that you have to hit the eye to kill it faster, but there's a little bit more to it. Um, First is the eye first opens after 3 seconds of you initially attacking it, and it deals a flat true damage of its current HP, and as a result, it is up to your utmost priority to attack it the first time. After it has been attacked, it closes. And then in 10 seconds, if you don't do anything and you still stay in combat with it, then it will open again. The trick is the more auto attacks that you apply to it, unique champion auto attack, it reduces a 10-second timer by 2.5 seconds every time until it caps at 3 seconds. So it's really important that you have more champions that are auto attacking the Herald, because it is a very tanky objective, and as a result, like attacking it with auto like abilities and other means actually doesn't kill it that quickly. Auto attacks, however, do, because it forces the eye to open more. The only trick is that it will no longer open its eye after it goes below 15%. So one of the things that a lot of people do is if the eye opens and then you're near the 15% threshold, then they'll purposely delay it until it is lower than 10%, where you could just one shot it by hitting the eye. And usually it is really important that you do this, especially when there's a chance that the enemy could steal it, because it is like the 10% threshold is above 1000 HP, which is well over the smite ceiling, and even it could be around 800 HP, which is also above the smite ceiling around the time the Herald is being contested. So it is a nice trick to know. And then now we're gonna get to the dragons, more which is like obviously the more well documented part of this entire trend of things. I would like just pretty much run down on what specifically they do, and then give you a little bit of like a useful tool that gives you like which ones that you should prioritize if it is present on the first time that you actually see it. Infernal Drake deals an area of effect damage in a cone shape when it attacks. It is the only one that will actually do so, other than the Elder Dragon, and they grant a percentage increase in AD and AP when killed. Mountain dragons are tankier than other dragons, and then they attack slower in return. Of course, but they deal 150 attack damage, which is slightly more than the Infernal or the Ocean, which each deals 100. And then they grant a percentage increase in armor and magic resistance when they're killed. Cloud dragons deal 50 damage, but they attack double as fast as Infernal. As a result, they pretty much even out. Their focus fire on one champion is quite impressive. However, they're the easiest ones to kill, and they grant a flat ultimate haste when killed. It's not 10% flat AP anymore. It is 12. Keep that 12 ability haste, ultimate haste. Ocean dragons slow targets at the attack, and they grant a percentage health regeneration based on your missing health. Also, we want to know that a little bit more. One thing to keep in mind that I also noticed rather recently is that per dragon that you take, there is a buff that technically debuff that you get that is called Dragon Slayer, along with the stack buff that you get. Each stack of Dragon Slayer reduces the amount of damage that your team does to that dragon by 7%, and also it increases the damage that dragon does to you and your team by 20%. So, and that stacks per the number of dragons that you have, which obviously caps at 4, with you being able to control the soul. And at that time, the elemental dragon will be dealing 80% more damage to you, which is a huge deal. And it also reduces your damage flat by 7% each time, which also means that is reducing well over a quarter of your damage that you deal. So it means a lot more in application when you're at the later stages and you're thinking about leashing the dragon and starting it, and that you're baiting the enemy to go into you. All the enemy needs to do is actually just stand there and just have you tank the dragon, because it will actually deal as much of a champion in certain stages of the game. This is when I'm going to introduce this really useful tool that I use all the time called Oracle's Elixir. It is done by a very stat analysis that I named Tim. I recommend that you follow him if you want to learn more about in-depths of the game. But this is like pretty much the early game win probability calculator where it tracks all the trends of the games, of the pro games that have been played, and it detects what the correlation in between the dragons that have been taken, any gold leads if there's any, and then see how it differently changes. One thing that I would like to point out is the differences in win rates of these champions. So let's look at Mountain first. it looks like if I take it the first time, then I have a 54 chances of winning if I take it first. Ocean is only 0.1% off, so it is roughly the same ratio. And then we see that Cloud is slightly less, but not tangibly so because it's barely a percentage. But now you're wondering why I did this, but did these three first is because the impact of this one is actually the greatest. Look at this one. It has a win rate of a 62.7%. So when Infernal Dragon spawns first, I strongly recommend that you prioritize it above almost anything else because it is such a powerful dragon to have in the early stages because of the additional combat stats. Now we're going to be talking about the big boys, the ones that kind of pretty much um like sometimes like become synonymous with the game itself. Baron Nashor, like its buff is that it empowers the minions that is on the side and it also gives you a very large stat buff. Another thing that we don't know about necessarily when we're tackling Baron is that it has very high resistances and it debuffs one target is primarily hitting. That target deals flat reduced damage to Baron. The reason why this is reinstated is because Baron is an objective that is strongly discouraged from soloing, and the game is designed in a way that unless you have specific items and you're a specific champion, then Baron is an objective that you must take in either pairs or in large groups of 5s to 4s or 3s. Soloing Baron as a result is a very dangerous gamble. Elder Dragon is a very interesting buff where it only appears when one team has acquired the Dragon Soul, which is getting 4 Elemental Drakes and then getting the additional buff. It possesses higher HP than the other dragons, but it is much easier to kill than the Baron. And the buff that it kills is that when it gets to your execution point, which I believe is around the 15% of your HP, then it will execute, and then no matter what happens, then it will deal the true damage and execute the remainder of your HP as long as the burn is still applied. That's all the basic information that I have for today, and now I'm going to get to the gambits and the openers of the game. And it's very, and I use the word gambit much in similar to the way that like the term will be used for chess. Openers affect the way that the game is being played, and it will have a large drastic impact on the way that the game is played and the way that it is going to be structured for at least the first 15 minutes. These are the rudimentary, the very basic clears that I'm going to be presenting with you today. First is the full clear. Very easy. Start from any side that you want and then clear all the camps from top to bottom. And then the general idea is that you're finished by it around 3:15 to 3:10, which is exactly the time that the Scuttle Crab spawns at 3:15, and you're able to contest it onto that side. For example, you're starting on blue, then you'll be taking blue, Gromp, Wolves, Raptors, Red, Krugs, and then it will be 3:15, and you're going to be able to take the bot side Scuttle. Vice versa with red, and then you're going to be able to taking a red, Krugs, Raptors, Wolves on blue, and then Gromp, and then you're contesting that. What if you can't get to the Scuttle Crab on time? Then that is when you're thinking about like potentially other options. You don't necessarily, because Scuttle Crab, like I said, is very important. Then we will be pursuing situations where it is like where instead of taking Krugs, we'll be taking red, Raptors, Wolves, red, and then Gromp, and then as a result, we'll be saving ourselves the travel of taking this and also taking Gromp. So we could potentially be here in time. Another option that we have is called a side gank clear. This is applicable on any side as a result, but you have to start on the red side. You clear red, you go to blue buff, kill that, and then take Gromp, and then that will give you level 3 instantly. One thing to note is that these camps in the center give you less camp than the ones on the side. As a result, the general rule is that 3 camps on either side, all being cleared at once, will give you level 3. However, the only combination that will not give you level 3 is if you take 2 of these camps at any other, then that will not give you level 3. But if you take any of these 2 and then take one of the side camps, center camps, then that will give you level 3. The jungler is going to be clearing red, blue, and then Gromp, which is going to situate them either on the top side of the map if you're on blue side, or on the bot side of the map if you're bot side. And then you'll be pathing like this and then ganking them or diving them in any needs necessary. This is what you usually do when you're specifically playing around the lane that either requires a dive or requires additional pressure early. And the laner could either pull the lane towards them and then have it more accessible for you to gank like this, or push the wave all the way with a big wave so they could dive the enemy team. Vertical clears are the ones that are less common and more or less seen, not as much seen in solo queue. This is a clear that one you would expect to see, where the mid lane is the cutoff point instead of the river. Normally, the river is the cutoff point, and this is your domain. But the mid lane becomes a cutoff point because the bot side or the top side that you are going to be verticaling is much stronger than your opponents. As a result, you're able to take all this. The reason, and then of course the weak side has to also be very sufficient enough and be able to handle the enemy pressure. Otherwise, this is not advised. And what this allows you to do is not only take these 6 camps, but also apply extensive pressure onto the side that you're strong in, which could either lead to a dive or ganks or anything else that could greatly put behind the enemy laner. So these are the early gamuts, and then now we're going to talk about deployment. You just did that early clear that we talked about, and now you're back in base. What do you do next? These are the things that I greatly recommend that you know about and talk about when you are deployed, after you have deployed. And the ultimate rule of the jungle is that non-buff camps, the buff camps respond and the timers are visibly available, so you don't necessarily need to track that because you could just press tab and track it. But every non-buff responds after 2 minutes of it being taken down. And the reason why this is really important is because the way that the jungle camps work. They work in a way where the average level of your team is heavily dependent upon the EXP, the level of which that the jungle camp spawns with. At the moment that it spawns, it averages out all your levels, your team's average level, and then that is the level that the camp spawns in. And higher the level, more EXP it grants. As such, it is really important that the jungler kills the camps as fast as possible, so it is as optimal when you do it. So if you kill it faster, then it will spawn faster, and as a result, it will be of the highest EXP that it can offer. So with this in mind, it is important that you know which times that you have ganked in between the camps, or when you have done other things like taking neutral objectives, so you know to leave time and leave time behind, and at the same simultaneously be present at those camps when you're done with them, so you could clear them as fast as possible. Another side thing is that sometimes scuttle crabs will randomly spawn on either side of the map after the first time it will spawn on the both sides of the map. And oftentimes it could be on the opposite side of where you're pathing from. And it's actually advisory, especially when you're playing an early game champion that can skirmish well in the river, to completely alter your pathing and then flip it. So you could go to the side of the scuttle crab and then take it. With the same exact reason of it being that it is worth an entire neutral camp, and it is a net positive just because the enemy is not able to take it at the same time you're able to. Because ultimately, as we're going to learn with the more applications, jungling ultimately becomes a math game of net positives and net negatives. So when there are when this is, everybody knows what priority technically means. It is a popular buzzword in context to the jungle, and it is quite said a lot. And when this happens, everybody has different definitions of it, and this is the way that I think of it in the context of the jungle. The reason why priority is so important in the jungle is because there's no tower in the jungle. If you guys play Nexus Splits, then you will know that there is either Guardian Golem or towers that prevent you from going deep in. None of that exists in Summer's Rift. And as a result, you can technically go in whenever the hell you want. In theory. Not really in application. But as a result, when multiple champions other than the junglers are involved in contests within the jungle, then priority of the lanes become very important. Now this is when I bring up the concept of priority, as you would have assumed. Priority is when ally champions are permitted to assist you while the enemy champions are occupied in doing something else. Something else could mean that they have to pick up minion waves that are being crashed underneath their tower. They're critically low from a trade and must reset because they're of very little help, or because of direct detriment, because if they partake in it, then they'll be killed immediately and they'll be giving 300 gold and also respective EXP. Or they're killed outright from a trade and they're, as a result, physically unable to participate. These are situations, this is a good example of a priority trade, where the Udyr is trying to fight the Lee Sin onto his side of the jungle, but the LeBlanc is the one that is roaming early, and as a result, it becomes a 2v1 situation, while the red side mid laner is not able to participate. So that's all the things that I actually wanted to show you guys for the like for the basics of like this role. And this is when I'm going to just be closing it up with a example bot that I brought up that I've analyzed to like a pretty much um in depth. Let me bring it up. While I'm bringing it up, if you guys have any questions, shoot them to me, and then I'll just respond to them right now.
For junglers that don't have CC that have to contest Scuttle, or would you recommend they try to contest Scuttle at all if they see the other jungler there?
Normally it's like a very interesting game because oftentimes like there will be occasions like the best example is Lilia. Lilia doesn't have any type of crowd control that allows her to take scuttlecraft securely. However, like whenever you do have priority, then there are often like champions either in the side lanes or in mid lane that could actually crowd control the scuttle and they just instantly just like remove the shield. So when the enemy is like contesting scuttlecraft, it's actually one of the best places that Lilia could like thrive in because that champion thrives in one like small skirmishes where she's able to constantly apply her damage and her DOT. So it is actually like a playing ground for Lilia, so to speak, just because of that
But that
trait.
requires coordination with like the mid lane to come down and CC it
Yeah.
and fight with you.
Yes, Lilia is terrible at solo killing Scuttlecrap, but the reason why like the champion is so strong is because if she gets back up, then there's very little way for
주차가 될 것
enemies to actually
같군요.
take the champion down. So this is the game that I want to talk about, and it's a relatively old VOD, so actually like 2 months old. But the reason why I want to bring it up is because it actually discusses like a couple of things that we talked about today in full, simultaneously discussing a little bit more advanced concepts that which I will hope to be a teaser for the game for the class in the future. In case that you don't know anything about esports, Damwon Kia is like the best team in the world right now, and they are currently 11-1 in the most competitive region and the former champion, and they are the former world champions with the recent upgrade with Khan being like a much more stable topper than Nuguri as they've become a very good like macro map powerhouse that are just pretty much trampling everybody that is in their way. And the main contributor and to their early game success and their such stability is Canyon, their jungler. And we're just gonna be watching this VOD and then seeing the what potential things that he is doing that we could also replicate as well. One thing that we could immediately notice from this is that it is a standard reclear with both bot side starting on with both champions starting on the bot side, and as a result, they are simultaneously pathing towards the same side. Now, the first irregularity starts at this point from this on. If you haven't noticed, is that while Nidalee has already cleared these four camps, we notice that Peanut is actually not this Lilia, Peanut, aka Lilia, is deciding to skip wolves and then go to blue side immediately. Now, what we have to immediately recognize is two things. One is the cost of the priority, and the second is the potential of an invade. So when the situation occurs in an invade situation when both of these side lanes are able to shove the wave in like this, so as a result, these guys are occupied underneath their tower and they're able to move towards the side of the Lily and contest them. The reason why, as a result, when this happens, as I said, the rift is actually split into 8 pieces. It is split up like this, which is the 4 quadrants, and simultaneously, the domain of control is split up like this. And the top side controls this, like that. Top side controls that part. The boss side controls here. Oh, whoops. I didn't mean to do that. The boss side controls here. And the mid lane controls this entire side. Much large space, right? And as a result, mid lane synergy is the most important thing that we usually like to talk about when we're in the jungle scenario. But This is a proper tangent because we need to talk about what happens. Mid lane this matchup is a very Lucian favorite matchup early because you're able to shove the Zoe in. Simultaneously with Gnar as well. Gnar is also able to shove the Aatrox in early. As a result, Peanut is in danger of getting invaded. He knows that. So when that is the question, Wolves is the safest places like the camp that is that he could defend because it takes an extensive amount of time for Nidalee to path towards here rather than going to Gromp or Wolves. You could look at the fact that the arrow signs are much smaller for you to realize how much of a less of a travel that is required of this champion. As a result, he moves up here and then clears these two camps first because he knows that they're in danger of getting invaded. And all Canyon is doing, you're wondering why isn't he here now then? Because right now the priority has not been set just yet. The mid lane is not shoved in, it just got shoved in, and the top lane is still not crashed in as well. So they actually Canyon needs a little bit more time to assure that he actually has the right priority to make this play. Still not shoved in, and by the time that he is done with his Krugs, then Lucian shoves in the wave lane like this, and that he is able to move, and that he actually hovers towards the top side, and then make sure that this has been cleared. Now, all these champions have been cleared, and this is around the time that we talked about. Scuttlecraft just spawned, so now we have to talk about who's going to take it. Now, with the priority of these two champions that are being shoved in, then Nidalee is able to clear this camp with relative ease. But now, Peanut understands that. As a result, he needs to try to contest this one, or reset and then go to the other side of the map where he's going to be able to potentially clear back up again with efficiency, and then hope to catch Nidalee up in speed because of Lilia's superior wave clear. However, Damwon understands that, and since with the byproduct of them picking 3 winning lanes, they understand that Lilia is going to try to take the Scuttlecraft. As a result, they take it themselves. With Galio being able to knock up Scuttlecraft and apply CC to it, then it goes down with extreme speed. And by the time that they get there, the Scuttlecraft is already gone. And now, this is when we're talking about the difference in tempo. And we're going to be talking about this. This is a keyword that we're going to be using a lot in the upcoming sessions. Now, the reason why tempo is important and what tempo pretty much means is you are doing the things as fast as possible. So by the time that you're done with by the time that you're done, then you're going to be at a situation where you're going to be able to do more things than the enemy because of the time that you have saved. It's like basically skipping turns in some respects, and then as a result being allowed to do more things in the future. Now, Lilia does not reset here and chooses to delay getting items, which Nidalee has gotten. She is basically 850 gold ahead of this Lilian stats right now. But the reason why they decide to stay is because they know what will happen if they just give this up. So right now, effectively, Nidalee has gotten 1 additional camp ahead of her, and as a result, she's going to be ahead of tempo as a result. So when Peanut understands at what time that this camp is going to be up, which is approximately around 4:10 to 4:15. It is also really important camp timer to keep in mind, because if you have taken a side camp like this simultaneously, this camp, or if you started on red or blue, Gromp or Krugs is going to spawn around 4:10 to 4:15. And they know this timer, as a result they're playing around it because it is about to spawn. And they want to take it away from him. But here's the thing. They're not able to take the champion down, and simultaneously they don't have priority. So Damwon's bot lane doesn't necessarily have to respond to their making plays, and they're not required to do anything, so they're easily able to match it like that. And Canyon's camps get saved. So this is a situation where Lilia didn't get to reset. Simultaneously, they were not able to take it. So she has effectively spent all that time of 30 seconds for nothing, while Nidalee was able to effectively get that farm. So now Nidalee is in a really good spot. At the same time, Lilia is in a very bad spot, where they are pretty much doing the same exact clear, but the issue is Nidalee is so much stronger. And as a result, he's able to walk into this like this because he is such a strong champion with a 900 gold lead, and he's checking the Scuttlecraft, and luckily enough for Peanut, it has already been taken. But if it has not been taken, or if he had reset, then this will immediately be theirs. But the thing is, last thing for today, he knows the camp when it was taken. Remember, 4:51. That's when the camp was being taken, and then let's see his pathing from this point on. And now, they have full information of when the camp is spawning because they have seen their vision. So as a result, they play around it. Gnar preemptively wards to ensure that the camp is still alive and know for them to detect whether or not Lilia is already there. The Lilia has reset after taking Raptors, and this is the information they're able to derive because they don't see the champion on the ward just yet. So as a result, they prep the lane again. Gnar shoves the wave in. Lucian also shoves the wave in. They play around the priority, and by the time that the priority has already been set, the jungler is already in this position. And now, again, this is a situation where they have two people that are ready to be able to take the fight. As a byproduct, it becomes a battle of 2v1s, and then they effectively take it away from him at the same time, like there he's able to hit level 6. Now, let's take a look at what Canyon does, because he knows when this camp is going to respawn, right? He knows exactly at what time that it is going to respawn. As a result, he's going to play around it. So he knows when this camp has been taken. Which is 6:20, approximately, or 6:10, whatever. So by the time that 8-minute mark comes, voila, he's there. When the minion waves camp coming back up. So this is when in application, when these really good players are just all play around the fact of the timers that they do know, and that they're planning all their champions, and their champions are respectively coordinating around the jungler to ensure that one, their jungler is ahead, and simultaneously putting the enemy jungler behind. And this is a very strong virtue even in solo queue, because counter jungling is the best way to win early game right now. Objective control is nice. Again, Infernal Drake is a great boon, but at the same time, another thing that you could do to completely screw over the enemy champions early game is to get their enemy jungler behind because of the EXP differential, which drastically improves your possibility of winning smite fights, and simultaneously gives you more control over the camps, which is also a very heavy resource, lucrative resource in the early stages. And that's it for me today, actually. And the next session is just going to be entirely revolving around like me like elaborating further onto the specific jungle clears of more recent games, and then talking more about like more advanced practices such as faking, invade timing, and also dragon pulls. So if does anybody have any questions? Alrighty then. If you don't have any questions, then just thanks for
I have
coming.
one
Oh yeah, you
question.
do.
What would you recommend you do if you're like solo queue as a jungler because you can't really coordinate with your laners well? And it
Um,
seems like priority is pretty important.
Um, one thing that I recommend is learn how to press F keys. So the reason why F keys are really useful is because for people who don't know what F keys are, if you press F1 to 5, then it actually gives you a specific camera in like perspectives of every champion in your allied team. One being your top laner, and then going all the way down to support being F5. And if you know how to press all these keys, and then you're instantly able to identify what lane state those states are in, and then you're able to assess, like judge where it's going to be by the time that you get there. And then then you're able to assume priority off of those things, and then you could just assist ping to get those people to come to you, because most solo queue solo queue players are aware that they don't really have much to do after they crash the wave, and as a result, if you get the assist ping, then they'll be more than happy to help you. But it is up to you to see those opportunities and get them to help you, and that is a major difference maker in solo queue for jungle.
Thanks.
Um, so sometimes I have to autofill jungle, and like I'm just gonna be straightforward. My jungling skill is probably iron or bronze level.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the top priority thing for me to work on? Just in terms of making sure that I don't feed my face off.
Two things. I would recommend that you pick very easy champions to play. I recommend Lilia. I recommend Mumu. Recommend Rammus. Those champions are the ones that are very easy to play, has very good wave clear, at the same time has very simple hits that will allow you to pretty much play the game without worrying about the champion mechanics itself. another thing that I recommend is learn how to play around big waves, because small waves are not necessarily easy to predict. Like 3-4 minion waves are not going to be easy to predict, but like when there's like a huge minion wave on the minimap and it's so glaringly visible, then that's when you know that, oh, the wave is going to shove back onto us, or the wave is going to shove out, and play around those times. Be there for when the big wave shoves out, because that's a really obvious timer for the enemy jungler to gank. Be there when the wave is shoving back towards them, no, shoving back towards you, vice versa, because it is also a great opportunity for you to gank. And sometimes like the enemy jungler is not going to be aware of that because of the low MMR.
You're talking about when the wave crashes to the enemy tower, right?
Yeah, or it's about to.
Cool.
Any other questions?
When will the next session be?
Actually, I don't know. Usually I try to have it every week, but the trend has been bi-weekly, so I'm probably going to keep that because I just want to make sure that I have all the information required and for it to be actually a fruitful session.
Okay, thanks a lot for this session. It was helpful.
All right.
Have a nice day,
everybody.
See you.
All right. Thanks, Michael.
Mm-hmm.